Welcome to The Diamond Mine with David Fuller, a podcast from the Rough Diamond Academy. Hello, my friends, and welcome. I have a very special guest with me today, my good friend Tess Crawley, who is a psychologist and business coach. And she's coming to us all the way from Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, just down the road from me. And just like the rest of the world, we can't actually meet in person. Isn't that crazy?
It's
Welcome,
crazy.
Tess.
Hello.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
So I've asked you along today, and you've been very gracious in giving me some of your time because I know you're busy.
Yes.
Very busy at the moment. And it's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I guess to ask you to give us your take on adjusting to the new world order, this
Yeah.
new paradigm that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. It's a crazy time. It's a really interesting time. I mean, I've got this lovely view behind me. I'm doing. I don't know if you're seeing online at the moment. There's a lot of newsreaders and mental health professionals and all sorts showing you what their people see when they're online versus what everyone else would be seeing if they were standing in the room with them. And right now I've got this lovely view behind me, but I've got one naked child on the couch in front of me, a husband in the next room, and a sleeping child who's sleeping in the next room. That we are on top of each other and trying to work, trying to keep kids entertained, trying to do all the things, and everybody's in the same boat. And I think for me, I'm finding this notion of we're all in it together, which has become a bit of a catch cry. I think it's the most united we have been as a species ever because we are all doing the same things and all struggling with the same issues.
It's interesting. I've made this observation a bit too, Tess, that probably the first time in my lifetime, that I can recall where we've got literally a one species problem. Well, it's not one species problem, but it's kind of a world problem that affects our species, are united as a world as opposed to this country, that country, or this location versus, it's everybody's problem globally.
Yeah, it is. And it's it takes me back. I mean, I guess the only analogy I can draw from my lifetime and your lifetime would be going back to the Cold War. I have very strong memories of the Cold War, being a teenager during the Cold War and feeling this very strong sense of inevitability and doom. But even that was nothing like this. That was nothing like this.
Very different.
This is very practical. This is very practical unity. And, the fact that we are communicating like this, even though we're isolated in our own homes, is amazing. And I think that's one of the greatest things to come out of all of this is the fact that people are flocking in droves to reconnect with each other electronically. The number of evening drinks sessions I'm hearing about happening online. I've had Friday night drinks with my own team. I'm in Melbourne, my team's in Tasmania, and we had Friday night drinks together, first time in months, the other night. And it was lovely to just sit and have a chat and relax and have a glass of wine together. And then we went on and cooked our dinner. We didn't have to worry about driving home. That's fabulous.
I'm yet to have one of these drink sessions. We'll have
to organise one.
I've got a few planned. I just haven't quite got to them yet, but I love the idea. And well, there's something for the future. You can actually, go on a virtual pub crawl and not have to worry about the car keys.
It's exactly right. I had another one with some of my business coaching clients on Saturday night. So I had a bunch of business coaching clients here in Melbourne. God, it seems like last year now, but I think it was like 10 days ago. And they were staying in my apartment building, and we had a weekend working retreat planned, and we had come together to get some work done. And my role is to facilitate that, keep them accountable, keep them busy the whole weekend to get them moving forward in their own businesses. And things really changed during the weekend that they were here. We went from being quite comfortable going out to dinner together on the Saturday night to the Sunday, them madly scrambling, trying to arrange flight time because they might not get back into their own states without being quarantined. Like, it was just the amount of uncertainty and fear and anxiety, it completely derailed the weekend, but it unified us as a group even more than we already were. And so we usually meet on a Tuesday morning, and we also had a drink session on the Saturday night. Well, a glass of wine and the chat. Didn't talk business, just got together to decompress. following Saturday night and just had a glass of wine and a chat. And it was so lovely to be able to do that, to round off the stress of the weekend that we'd had, getting them all home, getting my husband back here from Tasmania.
Yep.
It was quite intense
And
bit of time.
I guess it's one of those things, isn't it? I know the story you had of both the weekend, and because I was going to attend a workshop you were having on the Monday, which of course didn't happen.
That's right, got cancelled, yeah.
And of course your husband being in Tassie and not sure if he was going to get that last flight or be stranded.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of these stories, right? Everyone's probably got one of these stories. I know someone who has, and which is that part of that unifying thing is that we all have a story. Whereas when it's an individual crisis, it can be very easy to get pushed aside in an individual crisis, like the rest of the world's going on as if nothing's happened. You're dealing with your own individual crisis and grief, and the world continues on and ignores that. Yeah. Here we're all, it's kind of like a unified grief, and I've been noticing waves of it, even in my own self and people around me. It comes in waves, and I'm curious if you've got any, I don't know, advice for dealing. Well, I call it grief because I think it is. The world changed. The life.
The world's changed, and I think especially combining my hats of a business coach and psychologist and business owner. What I'm seeing, I'm very much focused on how businesses are traveling. Small businesses are traveling at the moment, and the grief. The grief of seeing businesses that we love in our community shutting down. There's that.
Yep.
There's the grief for the business owners who are having to let staff go, and having to shut their doors, their dreams, potentially shattered. We've got a little local French restaurant, which is our absolute favourite, and they've only just opened their third restaurant here in Melbourne. And then they've had to close. So, there's multiple layers, and the grief is normal. I think that the key point really is the grief is normal. I'm meant to be in Tasmania today celebrating the last day of my ownership of my Hobart practice. I've sold my Hobart practice. I have two. I have one in Launceston, one in Hobart. I've still got the Launceston one, but I'm meant to be celebrating with my team today and feeling really full of the gratitude of what an amazing team they've been, and excited for their future with their new owner, who I know really well. So I was meant to be there today to sort of do the farewell and hand over the baton, and then celebrate tomorrow the new ownership, and I can't be there, and that feels very strange. But in the context, I guess the context in a way takes some of the spikiness away, because we've got a reason.
Yes.
It's not senseless. There's a reason, and we understand we're all fighting for the same cause. The government is announcing initiatives to help businesses, which is amazing. But the grief that we're feeling, in particular, I must say I do feel for those people who are losing family members to this virus, because I think in the wave of the enormity of what we're all facing, I think those people who are grieving the actual loss of a person are potentially being lost in the backwash.
Yes.
And so I do feel for those people in particular. And I saw somewhere, I think it's in New York or somewhere in the States, they're actually putting together, it might be the New York Times, is putting together a rolling memorial for the people who've been lost to the virus. And I think that we'll start to see things. I know museums are now starting to gather information about what this period of our history is like in the moment. And I hope that we will start to see something, rolling memorials here as well to the people who've been lost. I think it's really important that we not forget those families. But from a business perspective, business owners, they're frightened, they're anxious for the future, there's no certainty, they can't give their staff any certainty. And there's that grief that comes with loss of control and loss of a dream, or potential loss of a dream. So it's very normal. I think it's very normal, and that's probably the first thing, is to accept that that's normal, a normal feeling.
So so first thing is accept it's normal. And
Yep. And I think, and then the next thing is to accept that this is a transition phase too. We're adjusting.
Yeah.
So we will reach a new normal, and by the time we get there, it'll probably all change again. But we will reach a new normal.
And it's happening rapidly, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing. It's the pace of this is incredible. And so everyone's going to grieve at different levels and paces as well. So as a business owner, and there'll be other business owners watching this. They'll have their own personal grief to deal with and the changes within their business structure, but they're also conscious of their staff, some who are still with them, some that had to let go, etc. Are there any practical tips for handling that stress and anxiety like that? How do you deal with that?
I think stay connected. So stay connected with other business owners. If you've got a network of business owners that you can talk to, I know that in some professions there's a lot of uncertainty and fear, and that can lead to poor behaviour. Certainly seeing a little bit of that in some sectors of the online community. And so I think be careful what you listen to and careful what you read. Don't buy into stuff that's feeding on drama. Don't buy into stuff that's feeding fear. Look to the people who are staying calm and steady during this, and perhaps listen to them a bit more, or look to them for guidance, or look to them for lightening of the mood, whatever it might be that you get from those people. But stay connected. Stay connected with your team, and stay connected with other business owners. I think now more than ever, having either a business mentor of some sort or a business peer-to-peer relationship is really important, because otherwise we are actually isolated, and this will only make it worse if we don't stay connected with others.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I've certainly made the point that physically we're isolated. That doesn't mean we have to be mentally or spiritually or emotionally isolated. We can still remain very connected. I think we're lucky. You and I in our group, of course, we have a wider group that has been connected across distance now for a couple of years. We're used to communicating electronically. But not everyone is. So a lot of people are now adjusting to this. The people that they used to sit next to or have a coffee with or a coffee break are now physically distant, and they're adjusting to how to remain connected. Of course, there's lots of ways of doing that. Things like we're using right now, Zoom or good old phone, whatever. There's lots of ways of doing it. But I think you're right. Staying connected is super important. And that sometimes requires a little bit of effort, but well worth it.
Yeah, a little bit of effort, a little bit of planning, but but you can be spontaneous. You can say, okay, I'm catching up. You can put a call out to your friends or your colleagues and say, all right, Saturday night, 5 p.m. Zoom call. Here's the link. Join me if you can. Yep. And and people will find ways of making this happen. I remember when my grandfather retired. He was a builder, and he was very well known and very well liked and respected. And when he retired, he had all these workmates that was his buddies on the work site. And the shock for him when he retired was suddenly there was crickets. There was nobody, and he realised that his workmates were just that they were workmates. They weren't actually friends. And it was a huge adjustment for him. And I think, if anything, we're finding that this platform is going to help us realise that we can bleed boundaries. We can blur them. Doesn't have to just be at work. We can actually have a catch up from home via Zoom. I think it's going to shift how we interact with our work colleagues and our friends and our peers. I'm excited by that, actually.
Yeah, well, that's one of the notes I have here to ask you. We can, and really it's a mindset thing. So I wanted your thoughts on this. How you view things often determines how you come out of them.
Yep.
So we have a disaster, in a sense, that you could look at it as a disaster and focus on that. But within that disaster, there is opportunity. Now, part of me says, the little voice of mine, you can't take opportunity in a disaster. But of course, that's wrong. And I think it's wrong. And I'd love your thoughts on it.
I think another way of looking at it, I've always loved that saying that necessity is the mother of invention. And so we are required. This situation necessitates us to get creative. It necessitates us to find new ways of doing things. And that's what I find exciting. I think that the need to be, sorry about background noise, children. The need for us to find new ways to communicate, the need for us to find ways to do business. I mean, I heard a story the other day of a plumber. I think I might have told you this. A plumber who's running his business via Zoom. Obviously got his customers wised up. They can book a time with him, pay for his time, they've got a leaky tap, blocked pipe, blocked toilet, whatever it is, they can jump on a Zoom call with him, show him the problem. He can talk them through step by step, even demonstrate to them what they need to be doing to fix the problem. And if it can be fixed remotely, it will be fixed remotely. Reducing the amount of time he needs to be interacting with people face to face, so reducing the spread. Genius.
It's genius. Actually, there's at least one general plumber in this group. I hope they're watching. And obviously,
Genius.
from a business perspective, you can probably pay for that consultation up front, so you know you're not taking any risk. There's ways of doing that online.
There's ways of doing that.
And
I mean, the practicals of that are super, super easy.
Yeah.
You set up, you set up a calendar, an online calendar like Calendly or Acuity. You block out the times that you don't want to be available to all and sundry. You make a link to that available on your website. You hook it up to PayPal. You set it up so people can book in and they pay. This is how my business coaching works. People book in, they're paid, and we each get the Zoom link sent to us. Bob's your uncle. So the ways that people are getting creative astounds me.
You have to be creative, don't you? And even in that plumbing sense, now there's lots of things you can't do remotely, of course, from a plumbing point of view, but I'm sure a leaky tap is something that can be handled. And one of the things I have noticed too, and we talk about this, I want to talk about this as a business owner and dealing with staff remotely too, because it's a similar scenario. Their productivity versus time at a desk, right? And this is one of those scenarios. As a plumber, you're not wasting time driving out there, or driving back or in between.
Stuck in traffic.
So you can do multiple consultations like this in a rapid fire way, still make good coin, and providing a service that's absolutely necessary, but you're not physically there. It's the same thing with having staff that are remote. So there's a degree of trust in that too. That understand that there's a difference between hours at a desk and productivity, a massive difference, because there are gains in not running around.
Look, there absolutely are. So, and with that, I then get a bit mouthy about things like fees. So, and what you charge. Just because you aren't driving around doesn't mean you can't charge the same call out fee.
Correct.
Now, because to the customer, it's still the time. They're paying for your time. They're not paying for your time on the road, but they're paying for the convenience of having you available to them in their home without you physically being present. They don't even have to get dressed if they don't want to. Well, let's hope they're not naked, but you know what I mean.
I'm not
so I think, no, I'm dressed. I can't speak for you, David, but I'm dressed. I think, sometimes people say, oh, but I'm not doing exactly the same thing, therefore I really should charge less for this service. It's like, well, hang on a minute. You still got a business to run. You still got staff to pay. You still got the taxes and the superannuation and the insurances and all the other things. And not everybody's needs will be met by that online service. And so if we continue the plumbing analogy, not everyone's needs are going to be met, and you might not actually be able to get out to do the emergency calls depending on how things go with isolation rules. And so your business will take a hit anyway. So then what it comes down to is a client by client, session by session, case by case conversation.
Yes.
If I needed you to fix a tap for me and your normal call out fee is, I'm just going to make up a number here, we'll call it $5 bazillion, right? Because I don't know what it actually would be. So your normal fee is $5 bazillion for me to come out to my house and fix my leaky tap. If I can discover that you're available online to help me, I don't even have to wait until you're next available to come to my house. You're available this afternoon at 3:00. Oh my God, the convenience of that. If it's still $5 bazillion, I'm prepared and able to still pay you your $5 bazillion.
Yes.
If I was a long-term trusted client and I just lost my job and I might not be in a position to pay your $5 bazillion, you might talk to me about how that looks. You might talk about, what about a payment arrangement? What about, pay a little bit each week? What about pay my $5 bazillion this time and next time I'll give you a discount? Like, there's several thousand ways that you can get creative around how you keep your business financially viable during a time like this. It's not price gouging. It's not profiteering. It's about honouring the obligations you've got as a business owner, because you won't be able to help anybody if you go bankrupt.
This actually leads me to a couple of things. So you say value versus service. Like it's the value you bring. So I was thinking about that plumbing scenario. You think about it differently and say, well, you're not just you're not just fixing a leaking tap.
Mm.
You've provided that service that you would have done in person. They've physically done the work. So I guess you could argue that they've done something. However, you've provided something even far more valuable in that process. And it's the value that you should be charging for, not the time, right?
Yeah.
You've actually taught them how to fix a leaky tap.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a question of shifting that mindset to one of value versus time.
Yeah.
And so it's not an hourly rate, it's a value rate. The value
Yeah.
I'm bringing is this.
Look, as a psychologist, I was taught, and I firmly believe that my job as a psychologist is to make myself redundant.
Yep.
You shouldn't need me. You shouldn't need to book in to see me weekly. I don't see people weekly, but you shouldn't need to book in to see me weekly forever. Like, that's not the role of that's not what I do. My job is to teach you to make yourself better, so that the next time you have a tough patch in your life, you can make yourself better and you won't necessarily need me. And I believe that that's providing great value to my clients.
Yes.
And I think that the same with the plumbing analogy there. You know, if you're teaching somebody, if you could do that for me, jump online. And I am not interested in fixing my own taps or learning how to. I could probably Google that stuff, right? I could YouTube search that stuff. I have no interest in doing that. I'd much rather either delegate to someone else to fix it for me, or the next compromise point for me in the current circumstances is you talk me through it gently and slowly and patiently.
Yeah.
So I don't have to spend the time, because I'm a busy person. I don't want to spend the time Googling how to do that for myself. That's one lot of brain space I don't have available, but stepping me through it, that's of excellent value to me.
It is. And the other thing I was saying about that from a business point of view, the second step to that is you're now providing that. You're also building a relationship for after this. And that's the thing from my point of view. If you just say, well, I'm going to shut up shop, I'm done until this is over, then you literally have to start again. Of course, part of what I'm about is helping people through this so that we have either a really healthy business right through it, or if it's a shrinking business or reducing business for the time being, that we have a launch pad to go to after this is done. So part of that is that relationship building.
Yep. I can't stress enough how important it is to be mindful of how you'll be seen after this is all over.
Yeah.
So we've got a bit of a bun fight in the mental health professions at the moment about bulk billing, because at the moment the government's made some fabulous moves forward in terms of making telehealth available to the community at a broader level. However, at the moment, and this will change, at the moment they've stipulated that those items must be bulk billed. Now, for a lot of mental health professionals, the fee for bulk billing is so low. It's a bit like I said to you earlier, it's a bit like a bookshop owner being told you still have to have all your staff, all your overheads and everything else, but you now have to sell your books at cost. You're not allowed to sell them for anything more than cost. So that analogy applies. And so we've got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of interesting judgments being made in some quarters of people and so on, and their billing practices. Number one, I think that no business owner should ever be judged for their billing practices unless they are actually doing the wrong thing. Like, I'm talking to you if you're selling a roll of toilet paper for $10.
Yeah.
But generally, most business owners are trying to make decisions based on the need to keep their business alive.
Yes, exactly.
Most business owners are terrified of people not paying what they're charging. And so I know the stress that goes into designing a fee structure. I know how hard it can be. And so I also know how hard it is when all of a sudden you're told, actually, you're not allowed to charge that. So the behavior that I'm seeing at the moment, it sort of, again, reminds me, you know what, how do you want to be seen when this is all over? Are you behaving in a way that's calm and measured and tolerant? Because it takes effort in the current climate to be calm and measured and tolerant. Patient, compassionate. It takes a lot of extra effort to be like that right now. But that effort, when we talk about relationship building, that effort, putting in the effort to come from that place is so worth it.
Yeah.
Because you'll be the one that is looked back on as being someone who acted with dignity during a time of crisis, and someone
that's
who
an
acted
investment at this point in time in your future business, and that's
and it's community leadership. So I talk a lot about influence, It's a word that's been really twisted in the social media age. But I talk about influence. Actually, I've got a little free downloady thing that I could give you a link to
Give
for
me the
your
link and
people.
I'll pop it in the comments, Tess.
And in that, I talk about, it's just a little printable brochure booklet. I talk about influence within your business. So, leadership internally, influence within your business. I talk about influence beyond your business. So, how you're seen, the legacy that you build, the reputation that you have. And then I talk about market influence. So building up something that is actually a sellable asset. So your business becomes a market influence as well. And all of this, how we behave, how we interact with each other, how we speak to each other at times of crisis is what matters. It really feeds into your legacy and your reputation. And I can't stress enough how important that is. Sorry.
Totally agree with you. And I have to say, I'm sure everyone has had experience with both sides of this already. And I have to say, I've been absolutely impressed by how most of my clients, 90, we'll go 98% of my clients have been so careful and understanding and patient, and they've had to make some hard decisions. Some of them have had to make some hard decisions on where they are with me and my services, and we've had those conversations in a very calm, mature way, and that has certainly made a massive difference from my point of view. I understand what's going on, right? So for me, it's not a difficult thing to have a conversation with me, I don't think, but I understand leading up to it is stressful, and actually doing it is not an easy thing. But there's been the odd one or two that have been difficult, more difficult than they had to be. And I think it's simply because the focus is on their little world and that
their bubble,
that it's a bigger thing. So I think you're right. It'll have an impact long term on how you view it, how you behave, and I've certainly grasped that very early myself as well. I think it's important to. We've all got to make a living. We've all got to get through this, but we also need to make sure we all get through this. And that through that process, I think there's a big opportunity in this, and that's what I was talking about in terms of opportunity to expand your influence, if nothing else, through this process. You may not expand your bank balance because there's a difference between price gouging, as in like, oh, roll of toilet paper, $10, and hey, I have secured this toilet paper. It's a little bit more expensive than normal, but I'm making 10 cents a roll on it. Can you live with that? And helping, right? Right, that sort of thing. It's
exactly right. I used the analogy the other day. The analogy the other day. If we hit a point where there were shortages in things like bread, and you're a baker, and you've got two people in your shop, and you've got one loaf of bread left. I would say in the current circumstances to innovate and to say, you know what, guys, I'm going to cut this loaf of bread and I'm going to sell you each half of that loaf of bread. And I'm going to charge you a little bit more than half the cost of the loaf of bread, because I also have to spend the time to cut it and to wrap it and to make sure it's in a bag and all the things that I have to do, and pay my staff to serve each of you and all of these things. Those sorts of innovations and being priced accordingly to cover costs and to sure if there's a percentage of profit there, not profiteering, but the normal allowance for profit built into the cost of that. Most people aren't going to have a problem with that. Where people will have a problem is where it's quite obvious that you're taking advantage. And taking advantage of the situation. And the toilet paper scenario is the classic one. We're seeing images online of people stealing crates of toilet paper and then selling them online for ridiculous prices and so on. And there's a special place in hell for those people.
Absolutely. Well, there is that distinction, though, you're making between profit and profiteering. And often people are scared of the word profit, but let's face it, we're business people, right? We're in business and we're trying to make a living. Profit is essential.
And I think I look at it this way: when I pay somebody, their salary. So say I was an employee, I am an employee, and I get X amount of money in my bank. That's the retail price of me. But the actual price of me is the on cost on top of that my employer has to pay. That's my profit as an employee, because that's the money that my employer is contributing to me having paid sick leave, me having paid holidays. That's what profit looks like from an employee perspective. From an employer or from a business owner perspective, profit allows you to have the paid sick leave, hopefully, the paid holidays, hopefully. Put your hand up if you're a business owner and you've taken long-term paid holidays. Very few do, but the reality is that's what profit's intended for. It's intended so that there's a bit extra on the side for you for doing all the hard work. There's a bit extra on the side for a rainy day, for a virus, for a pandemic. The profit is there to keep things afloat. But of course, most businesses don't run at a gross profit.
No.
We all overestimate how much we're going to make, and we underestimate how much that's going to cost.
Yep, absolutely true. And it's essential that we make decent profits, because if we're not here, whether it's through a pandemic or just through the cycles of business, if we're not here in a year to provide these services that people require, we're of no value to anyone. And it comes back to that term of value again.
That's exactly right.
And when you're setting pricing, and I know we've kind of shifted gears a little bit, but when you're setting pricing, in my view, it is about that value and understanding that you have to be around to provide that value. And that's important to understand about your business, regardless of what it is, whether it's the plumber fixing the tap or a psychologist helping to fix minds or whatever. It's value, and it's important. You have to look after yourself in the process.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I love, there's a bookshop here in Melbourne called, I'm going to give a big shout out to Avenue Bookstore. I've got no affiliation other than I love them. And the Avenue Bookstore, we go to the one in Albert Park, and fabulous bookstore, fabulous staff, very knowledgeable, love them. They have closed their doors, but they are running a behind the scenes skeleton crew, and they are offering free deliveries to people in their immediate suburban locations. There's a few stores, so I think they're doing it from each of their stores, and Australia Post deliveries for people further afield. And you can jump on their website, you can order what you like, you can paddle around and browse in there online. They've got all their books online, and you can bring them up. You can even online, you can there's an option to say, can you please call me to discuss?
Right. Yeah.
Now, how do I know all this? I know all this because they've told me, they've kept communicating with me as a customer. They've kept me up to date when they were sort of gradually shortening their opening hours. They've kept me updated with what they were doing behind the scenes. They've kept me updated with what is still available. So I feel quite comfortable knowing that I can still support my small local business. I don't have to jump onto the big conglomerates just to get something delivered to me. If I want to still support a local business, I can. That's innovation and great communication. And they're still selling their books at normal prices. So hopefully that will offset some of the cost of doing what they're doing. There's a butcher, local butcher in Toorak, Peter Bouchier, I think is the name of the butcher, who's doing a drive-through service. So people ring up, tell them what they want, drive their car into the car park at the back of the butcher's, ring them again, say, I'm here. Someone trots out with your roast lamb, a leg of lamb. You haven't roasted it yet, leg of lamb. And off you go. The ones that are communicating with their communities, whether it be by Facebook, by email, or however you're doing it, they're the ones that will survive. So it's innovation and communication. And again, allowing for profit, charging your normal fees. Charging your normal fees. Now, any of those shops, either of those shops could argue, well, I shouldn't be charging my normal fees because I don't have the same amount of staff on the floor. I don't need to do as much cleaning because there's not as many people traipsing through my shop every day, etc., etc. They should absolutely be charging their normal fees because they're not going to get as much custom during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Yeah. So the actual revenue drops. So I couldn't agree more. And this is that innovation, that shifting or pivoting the business. Smart. I've been really impressed with the way I've seen many businesses already shift. And I've been, well, obviously we have an audience here that's slightly wider than Australia. So we have some people from the US and the UK in here as well. And hopefully that will grow. But I've also been very impressed, at least with the way the Australian government and the local state governments are doing their best to support in really, really difficult circumstances. I'm not going to pretend all this is perfect.
Yeah.
What they're doing is moving rapidly. And I know in your profession, things have moved rapidly. Things that would take years have taken a week or 10 days. Yeah. And I'm seeing this. This is what can happen when people have the right mindset, or they're forced to have the right mindset. You can fall in a heap, or you can say, okay, what are my options, and pivot. And this is one of the things I'd really like to get across to people. There's
Mm,
opportunity in this to pivot, to learn from this, to collect
mm.
data, if nothing else,
Yep,
to see opportunities,
yep.
learn, upskill, change a business. And my guess is many businesses won't go back to being what they were because they'll have found a better way through this.
Oh, yeah, and that's what's exciting for me. That's exciting. I'm excited to see how we change as a society. I'm excited to see how businesses do things differently from here on in. I'm excited to see how all of a sudden geographical boundaries don't exist anymore. So from this period onwards, we all should have an international clientele because it doesn't matter anymore where
No,
we live. Going back to our plumber analogy, he could be in Mordialloc here in Victoria, servicing people in Italy, as long as they speak English or he speaks Italian,
doesn't
it's all good, right? It doesn't matter anymore. Um, so I think the government that we've got at the moment, the initiative that I'm really really loving. I'm quite fascinated by this. I'm listening to every press conference. I'm fascinated by what their approach is at the moment. They're referring to businesses going into hibernation, and I think it is such a smart strategy for the government. What they're
yes.
doing is they've released a package called JobKeeper, so that businesses that are either have experienced a 30% drop in revenue or are likely to experience a 30% drop in revenue can be eligible for $1,500 a fortnight per employee so that they can go into hibernation. A restaurant's a good example of this. It costs a restaurant far more money to open their doors than it does to scale down and stay open. Yeah, I mean, what I mean is it costs them too much to open their doors. They might as well close their doors. And at the moment, that's what a lot of them have decided to do, is shut their doors,
Mhm.
and they've lost staff. So what they can do is they can actually say, well, now we can continue to pay our staff $1,500 a fortnight thanks to the government initiative. That means when they're ready to reopen, they don't have to re-recruit and they don't have to retrain, which is such a slowdown in any business's recovery from any kind of crisis.
Not only a slowdown,
It's
it's actually an
genius.
expensive
It's
process
an
as well.
expensive
So,
process.
so if you've already
Expensive.
got
So
staff that are trained and ready to go, you're in a far better position once again to launch. The links, by the
exactly.
way, to the documents for Australian businesses here are in the private Facebook group. I put those up yesterday, the day before. So if you're
Very
looking
good.
at the documents, they're there.
Very good.
So you can download those, courtesy of my accountant, who's been brilliant in communicating, I have to say.
So
Um,
mine too. I've actually been saying to my coaching clients, if your accountant has not been keeping you up to date with
major
these
account.
initiatives, you need a new accountant. To all
Yes.
accountants, I would say, if you have not been keeping your clients up to date, think of the Avenue bookstore. I know exactly what I can do to support that bookstore during this time. If your clients don't know what's going on, you're going to lose them.
Absolutely. And I know it's different
Mm.
for different countries, but it's the same
Oh,
principle.
for sure.
If
Same principle applies.
you're
Yeah.
not getting that communication, then you need to rethink it. This is part of course, my strategy in doing the Rough Diamond Academy. This was happening before all this. Of course, I was
Mm.
working towards taking my business more international, certainly more Australia wide, but international, because what I do is
It
not
translates.
geographically,
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Mm.
So, and I've been building that in the background. Now, none of this was ready to go when this happened. So I pivoted and I created this private group. And hopefully
Mm.
part of this is creating a community where we can actually help each other through this. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that more people will jump on board, and hopefully we'll get some accountants from different countries even who might jump in and help provide some of this information.
Mm.
But
Mm.
that idea of taking what you have and expanding it beyond the current borders in your
Yeah.
mind, really,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's really where they are. There will be,
Mm.
I don't really care what your business is, there
Yeah.
will be some element of your business that can expand beyond the geographical borders that you have, even if you're a plumber, right? As you were saying, right? That there will be knowledge you have that you can sell,
Yeah.
that you can offer, that you can bring to a community. There's always ways to expand what you do beyond the
Yeah.
geographical boundaries that you have, or
That's
those.
right. And even the fact that systems are different in different countries, don't let that stop you. I think for me personally, the business coaching that I do, for the longest time, I thought that it was only relevant to psychologists because I am one. And then the more I spoke with other business owners, the more I realized that we're all speaking the same language. We all have the same barriers and we all have the same goals and dreams and desires and fears and the rest of it.
Absolutely.
So it's really important to take your blinkers off, especially at a time like this when we must innovate. Take your blinkers off just question your own assumptions about what you are able to offer and to whom, and start thinking. I'm usually telling people to niche. I'm usually telling people to double down on your niche, but at the moment, I think it's okay to just revisit that. Have a little bit of a think about who else.
I'm
And
big into niche as well too, Tess, but at the same token, and the name, the rough diamond, came from that idea that within every business and within each of us is a rough diamond. What the problem is often is we don't know what the diamonds are. So take that time to find them, mine the diamonds, and then you can cut and polish them, right? Often we've got an idea of what we think they should be, but when we really take that good hard look, we have something that we've completely overlooked for years. And
I think niching more now than ever really is about your message rather than your clientele. So your message may well apply to far more people than you can imagine. And if your message is clear and consistent, and that's really the niche, your messaging about what you do and how you do it and how you're of value to people. And it's not about selling, it's about communicating. Then it often surprises me the number of people who get in touch with me who I've never heard of, because I do have a consistent following of people that communicate with me regularly. And then increasingly, so in the current climate, I'll hear from people I've never spoken to before who'll say, "Oh, Tessie, I really appreciated the video you did the other day, or the post you did the other day, or whatever." So never assume.
That's a fascinating point. Great point, in fact. And often when you put things out, and I'll refer here particularly to things like social media, and when you're putting things out on social media, it takes a while, quite a while, and a lot of consistent effort to build a following. And quite often it can feel, particularly in the early days, and those early days, by the way, may go for a year or two, that you're talking to nobody. But every now and then you'll get a surprise. Someone will, drop you a comment or a DM and just let you know that, hey, that was awesome. I got so much from that. You don't actually know what people are taking from what you're putting out there.
I've got the perfect example of that, and I often mention this. And if she's listening, she'll know I'm talking about her. It's okay. But one of the clients in my top level inner circle program, I had never heard of her until she signed up for that program. So what I didn't know was that in the background, she was productively lurking, and absorbing, productively lurking, and absorbing the stuff that I talk about, deciding for herself whether or not she could gel with me, whether or not she knew, liked, and trusted me. That's the point of consistent messaging on social media. That's how people get to know, like, and trust you. She had obviously decided by the time I launched that program that she knew me well enough, that she trusted me, and that she liked me, and that she wanted to work with me in a really close, high level way, and signed up.
That actually touches on brand, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything you put out there is your brand, and it takes a while for people to build that. And people only buy from people they trust.
Which gets back to relationship, communication, how you behave during a crisis. All of those things are so important, and that all feeds into your brand. I often talk about your reputation. People often don't understand the difference between reputation and legacy. And reputation is what precedes you. Legacy is what you've left behind. Your reputation is how people talk about you. Legacy is something that you've left, like a little seed. We think of legacy as, what do I leave my children? But it's also, what do you leave the person that you've just left in a meeting or at a party or wherever? And you've said something that has sat with them, and before, at some point, that little legacy bomb is going to go off. So like this woman who signed up for my program, I don't know what little legacy bomb I left with her at some point with something that I said, but it was when I launched that program that went off in her mind, that little legacy bomb. And it's like, right, bang, that's it, I'm in. So reputation and legacy, they are such important concepts, and they're all linked with how we communicate, what value we give, generosity of spirit too. I think, we think about the Gary Vaynerchuks of the world, who are talking a lot about, give before you think about asking. And I absolutely agree with that. I'm always thinking of things that I can give away, doing, videos so that people learn something. And I don't care that I don't care how many people are productively lurking. I love the fact that they're there. I
It's a
love the
term
fact that
I'm
they're getting something out of it, you know?
totally stealing that term, I have to say. I'm not even going
Well,
to
I just made it up on the spot. I made it up on
Oh,
the
that's all
spot.
right. I feel better now.
There you
But it's true. The people do, they lurk, and that's normal. But I love that idea of reputation and legacy and,
Yeah,
and that giving.
yeah.
I think people are often frightened to give of their knowledge for fear that other people will take that knowledge and profit from them. But isn't that the whole point?
Yeah.
And it's not like you lose anything through that process.
You don't.
And I have to say, once again, I'm going to plug my little thing here. This is what this is about. This is about building that knowledge. And it's one of the things I want to leave with the audience today is that this also is an opportunity. You can watch Netflix for 6 months, or you can upskill and take from the generosity of people who are giving here. But if you like, build on the generosity of what people are giving and, you know, create something.
Yeah.
Isn't that a wonderful thing? It comes around.
It comes around. It does. It comes around. You know, I mean, Gary Vaynerchuk says, you know, people are always asking him, why does he give so much of his knowledge away for free? And he says, because I know 90% of people aren't going to implement it.
Well, that's actually a pretty universal fact too. Most people won't. But it also does, it establishes him then as an expert.
Yeah. And that's the thing, you know, you can charge your worth.
Yes.
You can charge your worth with a good clear conscience, because you're also providing value to your community in other ways. So, you know, I think that, and that's what I mean about productively lurking, you know, people who you might never know exist. They will never like anything that you've done. They'll never comment on anything you've done. They'll never share it. You will never know they were there. But in the meanwhile, they're in the background writing notes on the things that you're saying, really thinking about how they're doing what they're doing and how they could do it differently based on something clever that you've said. You've shared some knowledge with them that has made a difference to their business or their life, and to them that is gold. And to you, it might have just been a throwaway comment, knowledge that you've taken for granted, thinking everybody else already knows this stuff. The other thing I think is people do get scared of giving stuff away because they think, well, if I give stuff away, why would anyone then choose to pay money?
Yeah,
it's because you give stuff away that people will choose to pay money. And they will already see the value.
And they've got generous spirits. They want to help people who've helped them. That's a human trait. That's a human nature thing. And most people want to interact with people who've looked after them, who've done the right thing. Not everyone. There's that 5% will just take everything and you'll never hear from them.
Yeah.
90% who'll do nothing. But there's that 5% who'll grab a hold of that and work with you.
Yep.
And that's your real ideal audience, right? That's what we're shooting for.
That's it.
I mean, I've got examples of that in my own life. I'm sure everyone does. And there's a guy I followed for years. I was on his mailing list, and most of the time I'd get his email and I'd ignore it. And then I was looking at pivoting my business many years ago now, and literally as I'm sitting there thinking and writing out spreadsheets and modeling it, an email comes in that says, with a headline that's something almost about, this is how you do what you want to do, David. Like that's essentially what it was saying to me. Here, join this program and I'll tell you to do exactly what you want to do. And I did join the program. So I'd been on a mailing list for years. I joined the program and I was on that program for 4.5 years, paying every month. Because you never know where people are in a buying cycle. You never know where they're at in any given point in time in terms of what they need and don't need. So that's part of that process too, of adding value along the way, building the relationship so that when people are ready, you're there.
Yep. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's gold.
It is.
Perfect example.
You and I could talk a day. I know that. Because we would, if given half.
We would.
But I'm probably, I'm not going to hold you up because I know you're a busy lady. But I want to say thank you very much for your time. I'm
my pleasure.
Sure, as people watch through this, there's lots of little nuggets in there, and there are some links. There will be some links in the comments below this. So you can follow Tess on social media, go to a website, etc. And also don't forget to get involved in this community, because getting involved and also giving of your knowledge is part of what this is about. It's not, it's about spreading that across a larger community and growing it so that we can all come through the other side of this better.
Absolutely right. Yeah,
Tess, you're an absolute gem, my friend. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Love it.
We will talk soon. We'll do a virtual cocktail. Sure.
I love it. We have to.
All right, take care. Thanks again.